Hey everyone, this is Ryan from Arcade High, back once again for the Synthwave Series number 3, going over synths and a little bit of structure. We'll be doing things using all things built into Logic. We'll be downloading some GarageBand synths, which I'm actually a big fan of, and using those. And here's what we'll be creating today. Alright, let's get going. What we're going to do to get started here is I'm going to go down to my bass, and I'm going to duplicate the bass. Command D. I'm going to go ahead and just call this rhythm for rhythm synth. This is just sort of my main synth line, typically chords. And I'm going to use an instrument actually from GarageBand. To get this instrument, you may have to come up to Logic Pro X, down to download additional content. And then if you come down to the very bottom here in Legacy and Compatibility and open that up, you'll see GarageBand 11 Sounds and Instruments. So you want to check that and install those. And if you come up to the setting right here on our rhythm track and down to Legacy, we can access our GarageBand instruments. So I'm going to come over down here to Synth Textures, and you can use any synth for this. You can use any of the Logic built-in ones. One that I used to use all the time for my first album was Malachi Melodies under Synth Textures. So we're going to grab that one. Now this already kind of comes with a pre-built setup for the plugins. We're going to delete some of these. I'm going to delete my tremolo. I don't want that. The compressor I'm going to delete that for now. I'm going to move my channel EQ to the very top here, and I'll keep the tape delay. And for our channel EQ, I know for a fact I don't want to be boosting the lows and the highs, so I'm just going to go ahead and recall default, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So typically, like the way I like to sort of arrange my tracks from top to bottom is drums at the top, then synths, and then bass at the very bottom. So I'm going to move my rhythm up above the bass, and I'm going to go ahead and create an empty MIDI region. And I'm going to drag this all the way out to this entire thing. So I don't want this to loop a small section like the bass is. I'm going to have a full 4 bars. So we're going to double tap that. And here we go with our MIDI roll. Now we established that we were in the we established we were in the key of C, which we did with our bass here. Super simple, keeping it easy, using all white keys to stay in the key of C. So for this, we're going to throw in some notes here. Cool. So basically, you know, a lot of this stuff, you know, if you don't play piano, if you play piano, feel free to plug in a MIDI controller and start going at it. I don't play piano myself. I play guitar. So, you know, when it comes to kind of performing these types of things, a lot of this is kind of a little bit of trial and error. You know, don't be afraid to just go in here and slap some notes in and see what works. You know, put some notes together. Typically, I like to do chords of 3 notes. You can do 2 notes if you'd like, or some people like to do, you know, even 4 or 5 notes. You know, all kind of just depends. I like to kind of keep it simple. I feel that if you kind of get more than 3 notes, it can kind of get muddy sometimes, or kind of get, you know, just busy sounding. So yeah, I'm just going to stick with 3 for now for these, and I'm going to go ahead and just start holding Option to duplicate these notes and just kind of play around here. And I always like to check on my bass as I'm doing this. So, so if I listen to this, and I can kind of get a feel of where I am. So we're hitting this A, and we're moving up to an E. So I'm going to go ahead and move this down to an E to anticipate this E bass note, which is going to be happening right here, as you can see. So let's see here. Cool, and also I have this looped here, as you can see, so I can just keep pressing spacebar to just play through what I'm actually adding here. All right. And we're moving from an E back to a C. Let's hear how that sounds. It's not bad. Cool, yeah, and so as you can kind of see here on this one, I have the chord coming in 2 notches here early, so it's coming in a tiny bit early from on the 1 here. This, sometimes is like a neat little trick you can kind of do to sort of give your synth line a little bit of, a little flavor, make it a little less stagnant. It's all these subtleties that kind of come together to give your song character and personality. So now if we actually, and you can hold command and click to create a note as well if you don't want to duplicate the notes. We'll be hitting our A, and then our E. Cool. All right, let's play around a little bit. An interesting sound. All right, well, we'll stick with that for now. We can always change this later. Remember, don't be afraid to kind of roll with something that seems to sound pretty good in the moment, because that may inspire you to then start working on another part, and then another part, and then suddenly that original part might not sound as good, but you wouldn't have created those extra parts that you loved had you not had this original part as a foundation. A lot of people, will create a part and be like, oh, I just can't get it to sound correct, but it's okay if you get something that doesn't sound stellar at first. Just keep adding to it, keep trying to mess with different things, keep experimenting. All right, so let's go ahead now and duplicate that rhythm track, and we're going to call this lead. We'll use the same synth, same instrument. Let's just go ahead and change this waveform here to analog blend. I feel like GarageBand kind of gets a bad rap for being this, sort of non-professional type of thing, but it has some really cool sounds if you actually start to kind of dig through the library of the synths. Granted, they don't give you a lot of options, a lot of, sliders and knobs and whatnot for, your different synth settings, but still really some good stuff that you can probably use or utilize in some of your tracks. So I'm going to go ahead and actually up the release just a tiny bit and see how that sounds. whoops, I'm totally on the wrong thing. I want to be up on rhythm, actually. I wanted to up the release on the rhythm. There we go. All right, back to lead. I'm going to pull the release down back to where it was. All right, and let's kind of hear how this sounds. I'm going to go ahead and option click the rhythm, drag it down. And then I'm going to Command A to copy all these notes, and I'm going to shorten them to these shorter notes here. And so I'm thinking what we can do is we can kind of have this rhythm play, and then in between the chords have this lead line kind of fill in the gaps, sort of a kind of call and response type of thing. So let's see what we can do here. I want to go up an octave, actually, so that way it can kind of ring out and kind of stand out as that kind of lead. Delete those ones for now. Let's see how this sounds. Okay. And let's see. I'm going to copy these both over. I'm going to change up this last one. Check the bass notes, see where we are. To an E. So we want to move this to an E because the bass is hitting an E there. Don't want it to seem kind of clashy hitting that E and F. Let's try that. I'm gonna turn loop back on. I feel like I want one last resolution note. So we'll go back to our root note of C there. It's a nice little thing, a nice little ring out there. I'm gonna try an extra one there too. Give it a little bit more dynamics. Cool. All right, so now that we have our synths, and with these synths, don't worry too much about all these knobs and sliders and whatnot, especially like in the ES2. I mean, this looks super complex, but we'll come back to this stuff. I'm gonna do a tutorial later on that kind of has to do with sort of the basics of synthesis and trying to sort of demystify some of this stuff. It's really not as hard as it looks. Once you know the basics, all this stuff is essentially, between the different synths, it's just a matter of, well, how do I access these basic things? But once you have that foundation, it's not too hard. It just takes, you know, practice through repetition and whatnot. So one thing, feeling I want to kind of extend this, but first I want to kind of maybe touch up a few things. So we can look at the EQ of these synths. So let's check out our rhythm synth. So you can see here there's like nothing going on down in this, pretty much everything below 200 or so. So we're going to go ahead and just chop that, see how it sounds. Cool, and then also in the lead, let's check our EQ. I'm gonna go ahead and turn up our lead just a couple dB. And now when you duplicate tracks, you can see this says rhythm even though it's lead. When you duplicate tracks, it keeps the same name from the duplicated track. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click this, and then go to Name and Color, and then Rename Region. And I can rename this to lead, so that'll keep everything organized. So let's see. Let's actually, I'm going to go into the hybrid morph here in the lead. I kind of want maybe to see what will happen if I mess with a few of these sliders. I'm going to play this and play with the cutoff a little bit, and maybe the cutoff envelope, maybe the morph envelope, see kind of what happens here. We'll stick with that. That's a pretty good sound. I didn't change too much. I'm just kind of seeing what options we had. So I'm thinking I want to maybe try and quicken the pace with this a little bit. So let's grab my bass line, Command A to select everything, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab one of these notes and shorten it. So it's going to shorten all the notes as such. Then I'm going to hold Option and click and drag so that all the notes are then dragged over, so we're doubling the entire thing. Let's hear how that sounds. Cool, yeah, it definitely kind of gives it a little bit more of that energy. So let's see, let's go ahead and copy this entire thing. And Option over, and move our loop, and let's see what we can do here. So let's see if we can move kind of from one section to the next. Let's grab our hi-hat, and rather than doing this kind of fast 16th note, let's kind of go back to this sort of slower kind of, you know, type feel. So I'm just going to delete every other one here. Okay, so I'm just copying that over, so we have double that, and then we'll copy it over to these ones as well. So kind of when playing around with different sections like this, you know, a great simple way of just kind of beginning to get an idea for different sort of movements or sections of your song is to kind of just drop things in and out. You know, see how things sound. So if I let's say we drop the clap out. You know, let's even drop the lead out here. So yeah, so it has a little bit more of a feel where it's kind of going somewhere. It's moving from one place to the next. You know, just kind of getting rid of that clap, slowing down the hi-hat a little bit. And I'm going to actually talk about this a lot more in next week's tutorial, kind of going over some sort of theory type things in how to kind of add energy, allow the song to move from point A to point B, and kind of sort of different ways to think about structuring your song. But I think this is a pretty good spot. I mean, you know, you have your main rhythm synth, you have your lead synth, you have your bass, you have all your drums. So I think I'm going to leave this tutorial at that. And so if you guys want to subscribe, feel free to below. Please leave any comments or questions. I would love to hear what you guys think or want to learn once we kind of get out of this basic stuff. I know some of you watching this might be ahead of this, might be a little more advanced. And I think the next one will be interesting and more accessible for everyone, not just people starting out making music in Logic. And these theory things that I'll be talking about can be applied in any DAW. So thanks again, guys. See you next time.